Okay. Hi everyone, welcome back to this evening's video on Introduction to Firewalls. Connecting by telephone. If you use ISA server to connect to an ISP via a modem, you have to perform a few additional steps. Before you begin configuring ISA server, though, make sure that you have already configured a dial-up connection in Windows that contains the telephone number and other required settings to connect to your ISP. When you, when you create the dial-up connection, make sure that you select to allow all users to access the dial-up connection. Next, you have to configure ISA server to use this dial-up connection. To do this, you first have to configure an ISA server dial-up entry, which is a link that ISA server uses to refer to the connection settings that you defined. You then have to tell ISA server to use this dial-up entry to connect to the internet. To do all these things, perform the following steps. 1. Open the ISA management from the Microsoft ISA server menu. 2. In the console tree, the left pane, expand server and arrays, your server and policy elements, and then click dial-up entries. 3. In the details pane, the right pane, click create a dial-up entry. The new dial-up entry dialog box appears. 4. Type a name for your dial-up entry, type an optional description, and then select to link the dial-up entry to the dial-up connection that you have defined in Windows. The select network dial-up connection dialog box appears. 5. Select the dial-up connection that you want to use and then click OK. 6. To tell ISA server which credentials to use when connecting to your ISP, click Set Account. The Set Account dialog box appears. 7. Enter the username and password that your ISP has assigned to you and then click OK. The dialog box should look similar to the one shown in figure 6.16. Click OK to save your settings. So you can see here, figure 6.16, the new entry, the new dial-up entry dialog box appears here. 9. In the console tree, expand network configuration and then click routing. The default rule appears in the details pane. 10. Right click the default rule and on the shortcut menu click properties. The default rule properties dialog box appears. 11. On the action tab of the default rule properties dialog box, check the use dial-up entry for primary route checkbox and then click OK. You have configured ISA server to send all requests from clients to HTTP requests to the internet via the dial-up entry. Next, you have to configure ISA server to use this entry as well as requests that use the other protocols. In the console tree, right-click network configuration and choose properties from the context menu that appears. 13. In the network configuration properties dialog box, check use the dial-up entry checkbox and then click OK. Examining the 3 clients. ISA server supports 3 different client types. Before you configure the client computers to use ISA server, you have to understand what each of these client types does and which one or which combination of these will work best for your needs. Take a look at each of the clients. Secure NAT client. Configuring your computer as a secure NAT client ensures that any IP packet from the client computer goes straight to the ISA server computer. ISA server then performs NAT, network address translation, converting between addresses that you use inside your network and ISA servers address on the internet. While ISA server is doing this, it also applies all security rules that you configured. Thus, the name secure NAT. Any computer or other device that uses TCP/IP protocol suite can be a secure NAT client. All you have to do is configure the computer's default gateway to the internal IP address of the ISA server computer. For example, if the internal IP address of the ISA server computer is 192.168.1.1 and you are configuring a client computer running Windows 2000, just do the following steps. Right click My Network Places on the icon desktop and the Choose Properties from the context menu that appears. The Network and Dial-Up Connections window appears. 2. Right click the network adapter that you are configuring and then choose Properties from the context menu. The Properties dialog box for your network connection appears. 3. Scroll down until you find the entry for Internet Protocol TCP/IP. Select the entry without clearing the checkbox next to it and then click the Properties button. The Internet Protocol TCP/IP Properties dialog box appears, shown in figure 16.7. So see here figure 16.7, the Internet Protocol TCP/IP Properties dialog box. 4. Enter the internal IP address of your ISA server computer in the default gateway field of the Internet Protocol TCP/IP Properties dialog box. 5. Click OK twice and then close the Network and Dial-Up Connections window. Firewall Client. If your computer is running at least a moderately recent version of Windows 95, OS R2, 98, ME, NT 2000, XP or Windows Server 2003, you can install Firewall Client software on your computer. The Firewall Client intercepts all WinSock, Windows sockets, requests from applications that use TCP/IP and forwards them to ISA server over a connection that is previously established with the ISA server computer. This includes all network traffic that uses the TCP and UDP protocols and that is not addressed to the local network, which comprises the vast majority of internet traffic. Installing the Firewall Client gives you several advantages over configuring your computer as a secure NAT client. User authentication. Before the firewall can send any data, it establishes a session with ISA server. Part of this session involves authentication, which means that the ISA server knows which user is sending the data that flows. Therefore, you can then use user-based rules confident in the knowledge that ISA server knows how to apply them. For example, you can set up a rule that allows only the CEO of your company to access a sports site. ISA server and the Firewall Client work together to determine whether a request for this site is needed coming from the CEO. Support for complex protocols. Some network protocols require more than one connection to perform an action. ISA server supports some of these multi-connection protocols for all clients. However, because the Firewall Client can communicate with ISA server about how different connections fit together, Firewall Clients can use almost any protocol that uses more than one connection. Before you can use the Firewall Client on a computer, you have to install it from a shared directory that ISA server creates. You can't install the Firewall Client directly from the CD because the installation uses configuration information from your ISA server computer. To install the Firewall Client, perform the following steps. 1. On the client computer's desktop, click the Start button and then choose Run from the menu that appears. The Run dialog box appears. In the Open box, type //server /MSP CLNT /setup.exe, where server is the name of the ISA server computer, and then click OK. The Microsoft Firewall Client the Microsoft Firewall Client install wizard appears. In the install wizard, click Next twice and then click Install. The Firewall Client software is installed. 4, click Finish. Web proxy client. The remaining client is the web proxy client, which can retrieve only web objects. These are objects that are accessed from your web browser by using the HTTP or FTP protocols. You can configure most web browsers such as Netscape Navigator and Microsoft Internet Explorer as web proxy clients. Also, some other applications such as MSN Messenger can function as web proxy clients. A web proxy client gives you the best possible performance for retrieving objects from the web, and it's smart enough to get configuration information from ISA server so that it can always communicate with ISA server most efficiently. The configuration of your web proxy clients depends on the browser or the web applications that you use. The following steps tell you how to configure Microsoft Internet Explorer as a web proxy client. 1. In the Internet Explorer, choose Tools, Internet Options from the main menu. The Internet Options dialog box appears. 2. Click the Connection tab and then click the LAN Settings button. The Local Area Connection LAN Settings dialog box appears, shown in figure 16.8.3. In the Local Area Network LAN Settings dialog box, check the Use a Proxy Server checkbox, type the name of your ISA server computer in the address box, and then type 8080 in the port box. For the best performance when accessing websites on your internal network, check the Bypass Proxy Server for local addresses and check box, and then click OK twice. After you configure your browser to use ISA server as a proxy server, it forwards all requests for web objects to the ISA server instead of trying to retrieve them directly. So you can see here figure 16.18, the LAN settings dialog box in Internet Explorer. The best client for you. So far you've had a choice to see what each client can do. Now you're probably wondering which one to use. The answer depends on your access needs. And for the best possible performance, you may want to use 2 or 3 of the clients on your computer at the same time. You can use table 16.1 to make a decision about which clients to use. So if then you can allow the use of protocols other than TCP and UDP between your network and the internet, configure a secure NAT client. You are running an operating system that doesn't support the firewall client, configure a secure NAT client or a web proxy client. You want to use TCP IP based applications in addition to a web browser. Configure a secure NAT client or install the firewall client. You want the best possible performance for web access. Configure a web proxy client. You want to control internet access. Configure a web proxy client or install the firewall client. You want the best of both worlds. Configure a secure NAT client as well as a proxy client and then install the firewall client. As you can see, the decision about which clients to use depends on a number of factors. Fortunately, if you use all the clients that your computer supports, you'll be sure to get the best possible performance and the widest support for applications. When you use your web browser, the web proxy client is used. When you use any other TCP IP-based application, the firewall client is used, unless you use protocols other than TCP and UDP. In this case, the secure NAT client takes over. So if you're not sure, simply install the firewall client and configure the computer to act as a web proxy client and a secure NAT client. Following rules, the two types. If you try accessing the internet after you install ISA server, you may discover that ISA server blocks all requests. Before you can access the internet, you need to configure rules that allow users internet access. ISA server uses two types of rules. Protocol rules. Protocol rules allow or deny internet access for internal users based on the protocol they use. For example, you can set up a rule that allows internet access using the HTTP protocol, but doesn't allow access using any other protocol. Putting the two types together, to access anything on the internet, a protocol rule and a site content rule that allow access must exist. For example, if a user wants to access www.dummies.com, a protocol rule that allows access by using the HTTP protocol, and a site and a content rule that allows access to the www.dummies.com site must exist. Also, no protocol rule or site or content rule that denies access can apply. For example, if you configure a protocol rule that allows all users to use the HTTP protocol and another protocol that denies a particular user, such as the mail clerk, use the same protocol, that he or she can't access websites. Rules should implement the security policy of your organization. Before you configure any rules, spend some time planning how this security policy translates into specific rules. When you have the list of rules, make sure that all the decision makers in your company agree with it. For example, if you don't want the CEO to find out by surprise that she can no longer access her favorite website, and you certainly want her to back you up if other people in your company start complaining about being locked out of this or that. The first steps is to decide whether you want to allow access, the first step is to decide whether you want to allow all access unless denied, or whether you want to deny all access unless allowed. ISA server assumes that most organizations want to allow access to all sites and then create exceptions to this rule, which is why ISA server comes with a pre-configured site and content rule that allows access to all sites. However, ISA server has no pre-configured protocol rule because most organizations want to allow only certain protocols and not allow any others. To create a rule, you may need policy elements. Policy elements are the building blocks of rules. For example, if you want to create a rule that allows internet access only during the lunch hour, you have to create a schedule policy element that defines your organization's lunch hour. Similarly, if you want to create a rule that denies access to a specific website, you have to create a destination set that defines the address of the website. ISA server also contains some built-in policy elements. For the simple protocol rule that we are creating in this chapter, you don't need to configure additional policy elements, but remember that for more involved rules, you may have to create the required building blocks first. You can find out more about policy elements from ISA server help. So I'm going to leave it here this evening for this video. If you like listening, please consider like, sharing and subscribing. Thank you.